The moment the handcuffs snapped shut, the cabin went silent. Not the polite silence of wealthy people pretending nothing is wrong. This was the kind of silence that sucks the air out of your chest. The kind where even the hum of the engines feels too loud. The man in the aisle seat froze mid-breath, his knuckles white against the armrest. Across from him, a woman in a faded navy cardigan sat perfectly still, her ankles crossed, her gaze steady. She did not flinch when the federal marshal tightened the cuffs around her wrists. "You are being detained under suspicion of interference with flight operations," the marshal said, voice flat, rehearsed. "You will remain seated until further instructions." A few rows back, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice followed, sharp and judgmental. "I knew it. I told you something was off about her." The woman did not look back. She stared straight ahead, at nothing, as if she were already somewhere else. This had not been how Captain Andrew Keller imagined his final pre-departure check would go. 23 years of flying, military background, 0 accidents, 0 incidents. His reputation was built on control, precision, authority. When Andrew Keller walked onto a flight deck, chaos stepped aside. And yet here he was, standing just inside the cockpit door of a Gulfstream G600, watching a federal marshal cuff a passenger 2 minutes before scheduled departure from Palm Beach International. His jaw tightened. "This is getting us delayed," he muttered. The first officer, Ryan Mitchell, glanced over. 34. New to private charter. Still had that look in his eyes, the one that said he believed rules existed for a reason. "Sir," the marshal said, "TSA flagged her boarding pass." Andrew exhaled sharply through his nose. "TSA flags a lot of things. Doesn't mean we turn my aircraft into a crime scene." From the galley, flight attendant Laura Bennett peeked around the corner. Her hand hovered near her chest, fingers curled tight. "Captain, the passenger is asking why she's being detained." Andrew didn't answer right away. He looked down the aisle. The woman sat alone now. Her carry-on rested neatly at her feet. Canvas. Old. No designer logos. Her shoes were sensible flats, scuffed at the toes. Grey threaded her hair, pulled back into a low knot. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. The kind of face people stopped seeing once it aged out of glamour. She looked ordinary. Too ordinary for a jet like this. Andrew felt the familiar irritation rise. He had spent decades learning how to read people. Wealth announced itself. Confidence left fingerprints. People who belonged in cabins like this moved differently. She did not. "She needs to stay put," Andrew said. "Marshall's doing his job." Laura hesitated. She asked if she could call her attorney. Andrew scoffed. "Everyone has an attorney until they don't." He stepped fully into the cabin, shoulders squared, posture rigid. The passengers tracked him with their eyes, men in tailored jackets, women with quiet jewelry that cost more than cars. This was his domain. He stopped beside the detained woman. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly, but not warm either. "We're sorting out a security issue. Best thing you can do right now is cooperate." She turned her head slowly and looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, not confused, not afraid. Measured. "I have been cooperating," she said. Her voice was low, steady, unmistakably American. Midwest, maybe. "I boarded when instructed. I sat where I was assigned. I followed every rule." Andrew held her gaze. There was something there. Not defiance, not submission, something harder to name. The Marshal seems to think otherwise, he said. She glanced at the cuffs, then back to him. Did he explain what I'm accused of? Andrew shook his head. That's not my call. A beat passed. Captain, she said, reading the name stitched on his uniform. May I ask you something? He stiffened slightly. Make it quick. Before you let them take me off this plane, she said, did you personally verify the alert that triggered this? Andrew's jaw flexed. Security protocols are not subject to passenger debate. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else pulled out a phone, then thought better of it. The Marshal cleared his throat. Captain, we need to proceed. Andrew nodded. Do it at the gate. I don't want this playing out on the tarmac. The woman inhaled slowly, then spoke again. Captain Keller, she said, voice still even. There is a difference between protocol and responsibility. I suggest you find out which one you're exercising. Andrew felt heat creep up his neck. I've flown heads of state, he said quietly. I don't need advice from someone who tripped a TSA algorithm. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not anger, disappointment. Laura noticed it too. She took a step closer. Captain, her boarding documents were cleared earlier. I scanned them myself. Andrew shot her a look. Stay in your lane. Laura swallowed but didn't retreat. Sir, I'm just saying. This feels wrong. The Marshal checked his watch. Captain, we either deplane her now or delay everyone. Andrew made his decision. Remove her, he said. The Marshal guided the woman to her feet. She rose without resistance. Her balance was steady, dignified, as if she had done this before. As they started down the aisle, the whispers grew louder. I knew she didn't fit. Probably stole someone's boarding pass. Private jets attract all kinds now. Laura watched, heart pounding, as the woman passed her. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Thank you for trying, the woman said softly. Laura felt a chill run through her. At the aircraft door, the woman paused. Captain Keller, she said, not turning around. You're about to make a very expensive assumption. Andrew didn't respond. The door closed behind her, with a dull hydraulic thud. The cabin exhaled. Andrew adjusted his cuffs, straightened his shoulders, and turned back toward the cockpit. Let's move. We're already behind schedule. Ryan hesitated. Sir, what if she wasn't the problem? Andrew stopped. Slowly, he turned. What she was, Andrew said, voice cold, is not my concern. My responsibility is to the safety and standards of this aircraft. He stepped into the cockpit and closed the door. Outside, under the Florida sun, the woman stood on the jet bridge, hands still cuffed, listening to the engines begin their low, impatient growl. She closed her eyes and smiled. The jet bridge smelled like disinfectant and burned coffee. Evelyn Brooks stood with her wrists cuffed in front of her, the cold metal biting just enough to remind her this was real. Not humiliating, not frightening, just inconvenient. The Federal Marshal shifted his weight, already bored, already filing her away as another false alarm that would be forgotten by dinner. You got someone you want to call? He asked. Evelyn opened her eyes. The Gulfstream's engines were spooling now, a deep animal growl vibrating through the floor. The plane was moving without her. That, more than the cuffs, stung. "Yes," she said, "but not the number you're expecting." The marshal snorted. "Everyone says that." She gave him the phone. Not shaking, not rushing. Her thumb hovered for a fraction of a second, then pressed a single contact. The screen lit up. No name. Just an icon. It rang once, twice. The marshal glanced down at his watch. "Ma'am, we don't have all day." The call connected. "Brooks," a man's voice said. Low. Alert. Awake in a way that suggested he never really slept. "It's me," Evelyn said. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. "Where are you?" the voice asked. "Palm Beach, Jet Bridge, Gulfstream G600. Tail number November 8-9 Delta Sierra. I've been detained." Another pause. Shorter this time. For what reason? Evelyn looked at the marshal. "They haven't found one yet." The marshal frowned. "Who is this?" Evelyn didn't answer him. She spoke into the phone. "They think I triggered a TSA alert. They removed me 2 minutes before departure." The man exhaled. "Slow. Controlled. Are you injured?" "No." "Are you calm?" Evelyn glanced at the glass wall separating her from the tarmac, from the life she had been temporarily denied. "I'm fine." "Good," he said. "Stay exactly where you are." The line went dead. The marshal raised an eyebrow. "That your lawyer?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Something like that." Behind the sealed aircraft door, Captain Andrew Keller slid into his seat and forced his hands to steady. He hated delays. He hated disruption. He hated anything that made him feel watched. Ryan ran the checklist faster than usual. Too fast. His eyes kept flicking to the cabin door. "You think she'll cause trouble?" Ryan asked. Andrew didn't look at him. "She's off the plane. That's the end of it." Ryan hesitated. She didn't seem unstable. Andrew's voice sharpened. "Do you want to fly this plane or psychoanalyze passengers?" Ryan shut up, but the words stuck. Outside, 2 airport security officers appeared at the far end of the jet bridge, walking with purpose. Not rushing, not casual. Behind them, a man in a dark suit moved with a different kind of urgency, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight. The marshal straightened. "Looks like your call went somewhere." Evelyn watched them approach. She recognized the walk immediately. Corporate. Crisis-trained. The kind of man who didn't ask permission, because permission usually came from him. He stopped 3 feet from her. "Ma'am," he said, nodding. "I'm Thomas Reed." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're late?" His jaw twitched. "I came as fast as I could." He turned to the marshal. "Release her." The marshal bristled. "Sir, this is a federal matter." Thomas reached into his jacket and produced a badge, not flashing it, simply holding it where it could be seen. "So is mine." The marshal leaned in, eyes narrowing as he read. Then his posture changed, subtle, defensive. "I need confirmation," the marshal said. "You'll get it," Thomas replied. "In about 10 seconds. As if on cue, the marshal's radio crackled. He listened, his face drained of color. "Yes, sir," he said. "Understood." He looked at Evelyn. Slowly, almost reverently, he removed the cuffs. I apologize, ma'am. Evelyn flexed her wrists once, feeling the blood rush back. Apology accepted. The marshal stepped back. The security officers followed him without a word. Thomas turned to Evelyn. They've grounded the aircraft. Her eyes flicked to the window. The engines were spooling down now. The vibration softened, then died. Good, she said. Inside the cockpit, warning lights blinked. Andrew frowned. What's happening? Ryan checked the display. Ground control just pulled our clearance. Andrew slammed his palm against the armrest. On what authority? Ryan swallowed. They said, operational review. Andrew's stomach tightened. The cabin lights flickered. Murmurs rose from the passengers. A woman laughed nervously. A man checked his phone, then looked up, confused. Laura felt it before she understood it. The shift, the pressure change, the sense that something large had just entered the room. The cabin door opened. Evelyn stepped inside. No cuffs, no escort, just her and the quiet weight of certainty. Every head turned. Andrew stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. You're not authorized to reboard this aircraft. Evelyn didn't look at him. She scanned the cabin once, taking in the faces, the reactions, the fear, the confusion. Then she looked at Laura. Thank you, Evelyn said. Laura's throat tightened. I'm sorry I didn't do more. You did enough, Evelyn replied. You noticed. Andrew stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to leave now. Evelyn turned to him. Up close, he saw it. Not wealth, not arrogance. Control. The kind that didn't need volume. My name is Evelyn Brooks, she said. I am the acting chair of the Federal Aviation Oversight Council. The cabin froze. Andrew's mouth opened, closed. Evelyn continued. I was appointed 18 months ago. My mandate includes unscheduled compliance audits of private charter operators under federal contract. Ryan felt his pulse in his ears. You removed me, Evelyn said, without verifying the alert. You allowed a federal marshal to detain me without cause. You grounded a flight carrying 2 defense contractors and a sitting judge because you were irritated. Andrew's knees felt weak. This aircraft, Evelyn said, is now under review. A man in the 3rd row stood abruptly. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? Evelyn didn't even glance at him. Yes, she said. And you'll be interviewed shortly. She turned back to Andrew. Captain Keller, she said quietly, your career did not end when you removed me from this plane. She leaned closer, just enough for him to hear. It ended when you decided standards mattered more than judgment. Silence pressed in from every direction. Evelyn straightened. Everyone remained seated. We'll be deplaning in an orderly fashion. She paused at the cockpit door, looking at Andrew one last time. You were right about one thing, she said. I didn't belong in your sky. Then she added softly, you were never qualified to fly in mine. And walked away. The terminal conference room had no windows. That was deliberate. Evelyn Brooks sat at the head of the long, lacquered table, hands folded, posture relaxed. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, casting a flat, unforgiving glow that made everyone else look slightly worse than they wanted to. Across from her, Captain Andrew Keller sat rigid, uniform jacket still on. Cap resting untouched beside him, like a relic from another life. He had not spoken in 12 minutes. To his left, Thomas Reed stood with a tablet, scrolling through documents with surgical calm. To Andrew's right, a representative from Stratosphere Charter shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat every few seconds, as if oxygen were rationed. Evelyn broke the silence. "Captain Keller," she said, evenly, "do you understand why you're here?" Andrew nodded once. "Yes." "Tell me." His throat worked. "Because I removed a federal official from an aircraft without verifying an alert." "That's the procedural answer," Evelyn said. "I'm asking for the real one." Andrew hesitated. He could feel sweat gathering between his shoulder blades. This room didn't feel like a hearing. It felt like a reckoning. "I made a judgment call," he said finally. "I believed I was protecting the aircraft." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "From what?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "From uncertainty." Thomas glanced up from his tablet. Evelyn noticed. "Uncertainty about what, Captain?" she pressed. Andrew stared at the table. The surface reflected his face back at him, distorted by the shine. About her credentials, about her presence, about whether she belonged. Evelyn nodded slowly. Belonged. The word hung there. "Captain," she said, "how many passengers have you removed in the last 10 years? Andrew blinked. "I don't know." Thomas turned the tablet so Andrew could see. 17. Andrew's breath caught. "That can't be right." "It is," Thomas said. 17 removals. 12 resulted in formal complaints. All 12 were dismissed. Evelyn leaned back. "Do you know what those passengers had in common?" Andrew didn't answer. "They weren't disruptive," Evelyn continued. "They weren't intoxicated. They weren't threatening. What they shared was that none of them matched your internal picture of what a private charter passenger looks like." Andrew felt heat rise to his face. "That's not—" "Captain," Evelyn cut in, not raising her voice. "This is not a debate. This is an examination." She stood, slowly, deliberately, and walked to the far end of the room, where a screen flickered to life. Images appeared. Boarding passes, incident reports, grainy security stills, a woman in scrubs, a man in work boots, an older black couple holding hands, a Latina grandmother clutching a small purse. "You see these people?" Evelyn asked. Andrew nodded, his chest tight. "They paid," she said. "They were cleared. They followed the rules. And they were humiliated." She turned back to him. "Do you know what that does to public trust?" Andrew swallowed. "I didn't think—" "That," Evelyn said sharply, "is the problem." The Stratosphere representative finally spoke. "Ms. Brooks, with respect, Captain Keller has an exemplary safety record." Evelyn looked at him then. Really looked. "Safety," she said, "is not just about keeping a plane in the air. It's about who you decide is worth protecting." The man fell silent. Andrew stared at his hands. He felt exposed, not accused. Seen. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Evelyn considered him for a long moment. "Now," she said, "you're grounded." His head snapped up. "Permanently?" "No," she replied. "Conditionally." Thomas stepped forward. "Effective immediately, Captain Keller is suspended from flight duty, pending review. During that time, he will assist in a full audit of Stratosphere Charter's passenger removal protocols. Andrew frowned. Assist how? Evelyn met his eyes. You're going to help dismantle the system you benefited from. He stiffened. You're asking me to testify against my own company. I'm asking you, she corrected, to tell the truth. Silence again. From the hallway beyond the door came muffled voices. Reporters, phones, the outside world pressing in. Why me? Andrew asked suddenly. Why not just fire me and move on? Evelyn's expression softened, just a fraction. Because you're not the worst offender. He frowned. You're careful, she said. You justify. You tell yourself stories about standards and safety. The worst ones don't bother. She leaned forward, hands on the table. People like you don't change when they're punished. They change when they're confronted. Andrew felt something crack inside his chest. Not defensiveness, not fear. Recognition. I don't think I'm a bad person, he said, voice rough. I don't either, Evelyn replied. But that doesn't mean you didn't do harm. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young assistant poked her head in. Ms. Brooks, the press is asking if you'll be making a statement. Evelyn nodded. In a moment. She turned back to Andrew. One more question. He straightened instinctively. When you looked at me on that plane, she said, what did you see? Andrew hesitated, then answered honestly. A risk. Evelyn nodded. And when I looked at you, Captain Keller, I saw a man who had never been forced to question his instincts. She picked up her folder. That changes today. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, she added, you were calm under pressure. You didn't shout. You didn't escalate. Andrew's eyes flickered with hope. That, Evelyn finished, is why you're getting this chance. The door opened. Sound flooded in. Cameras. Voices. The world resumed. Evelyn stepped into it without flinching. Andrew remained seated. For the first time in his career, there was nowhere to fly to escape what he'd done. The training hangar smelled like oil, coffee, and old pride. Andrew Keller stood at the front of the room, with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at 47 faces arranged in neat rows. Pilots, flight attendants, operations managers, people who had flown thousands of hours together and believed they knew one another. People who had trusted him. A week ago, he would have commanded this room without effort. His voice alone would have settled nerves. His uniform would have spoken for him. Now he wore a plain navy jacket. No stripes, no insignia. Thomas Reed stood off to the side, arms crossed, silent. 2 compliance officers sat near the back, tablets ready. The door was closed. Phones had been collected at the entrance. Andrew inhaled. My name is Andrew Keller, he said. The words landed heavier than he expected. I was a captain here for 23 years. No one spoke. No one shifted. A few eyes avoided his. I'm here because I failed, he continued. Not because of a checklist. Not because of a mechanical error. I failed because I made a decision based on who I thought someone was, instead of what the facts showed. A low murmur moved through the room. He felt his pulse in his throat, but kept going. I removed a passenger without verifying an alert. I allowed a federal marshal to detain her. I justified it to myself as caution. He paused, looked at the faces, saw skepticism, curiosity, discomfort. She was the chair of the Federal Aviation Oversight Council. That did it. Someone whispered, "Jesus." Andrew raised a hand. "That part doesn't matter. Not the way you think." He walked slowly along the front row, his shoes echoing against the concrete floor. "What matters," he said, "is that if she had not been who she was, nothing would have happened. The complaint would have been dismissed. The record would have stayed clean. And I would have gone on, believing I was a professional who just had high standards." He stopped. "That is the system, and I was part of it." A man near the aisle crossed his arms. "So what? We're all racists now?" Andrew turned toward him. "No," he said evenly. "But we all benefit from a structure that decides who gets grace and who gets suspicion." Silence. A flight attendant near the back raised her hand, hesitant. "Captain, Andrew, what are we supposed to do differently in the moment?" Andrew nodded. "That's the right question." He gestured to the screen behind him. It lit up with a still image from security footage. Evelyn Brooks on the jet bridge. Calm, uncuffed now. Watching. In the moment, Andrew said, "You slow down. You verify. You ask yourself whether your reaction would be the same if the person in front of you looked different." Someone scoffed softly. Andrew met the sound head-on. "If that makes you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where change starts." A hand rose. This time from a pilot. Younger. Sharp eyes. "What happens if we challenge a decision and it turns out we were wrong?" Andrew didn't hesitate. "Then we own it together. Not the passenger. Not the weakest person in the room. Us." Thomas shifted slightly. Andrew noticed. "I stood in a cockpit for over 2 decades believing authority meant control," Andrew said. "What I learned is that authority without accountability rots." He took a breath. His chest tightened. "I'm not standing here because I was forgiven. I'm standing here because I was exposed." The room was still now. No whispers. No crossed arms. Andrew straightened. "This program isn't about optics. It's about patterns. Every removal will be reviewed. Every complaint logged. No more quiet dismissals." A woman in operations leaned forward. "And if leadership pushes back?" Andrew smiled thinly. "Leadership already tried. They lost." A ripple moved through the room. Not laughter. Something sharper. Realization. "Some of you are wondering why I'm still here," Andrew said. "Why I wasn't fired." He paused. "Let it sit." I asked the same thing. He looked toward Thomas, then back at the group. The answer I was given was this: firing me would have made me an example. Keeping me makes me accountable. A few people nodded slowly. "And accountability," Andrew said, "is harder than punishment." The door at the back opened quietly. Evelyn Brooks stepped in. The room shifted instantly. People straightened. Breath held. She didn't acknowledge it. She stood near the wall, arms relaxed at her sides, observing. Andrew felt her presence like gravity. "I want to be clear," he said. "I am not asking for your sympathy. I am asking you to pay attention. Because the next decision you make, the next instinct you trust, might feel justified. It might feel efficient. He swallowed. And it might be wrong. He stepped back. I'm done. The room remained silent. Evelyn moved forward. Thank you, Captain Keller, she said. Andrew nodded once and stepped aside. She faced the group. Some of you are angry, she said calmly. Some of you feel accused. Some of you think this is an overcorrection. She let her gaze move slowly across the room. I don't care how you feel, she continued. I care what you do next. A few people stiffened. You work in an industry built on trust, Evelyn said. People step onto aircraft believing the systems behind them will protect them equally. She paused. Belief is fragile. She turned slightly, gesturing toward Andrew. Captain Keller showed you what happens when belief is replaced with assumption. She folded her hands. This is not about being perfect. It's about being deliberate. A hand rose. Same flight attendant as before. What if a passenger really is a threat? Evelyn nodded. Then you act decisively, but you act on evidence, not instinct. She held the room. You don't get to be tired and take shortcuts with someone else's dignity. The words landed hard. This program will expand, Evelyn said. Other carriers will adopt it. Regulators are watching. She glanced at Andrew. So is the public. She turned back to the group. You don't have to like this. You just have to do it. She stepped back. The room stayed quiet even after she left. Andrew watched the faces as people stood, slowly, thoughtfully. No chatter, no jokes. Change didn't look loud. It looked unsettled. Later, alone in the empty hangar, Andrew sat on a metal bench, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Laura Bennett approached quietly. You were good in there, she said. He shook his head. I was honest. She sat beside him. That's new. He exhaled, a short laugh that held no humor. I don't know if it's enough. Laura looked at him. It's a start. He nodded, staring at the hangar doors as they slowly rolled shut. For the first time since the jet bridge, Andrew Keller didn't feel exposed. He felt accountable, and that terrified him more than any grounding ever could. The press didn't wait for permission. By sunrise, the story had slipped its leash. Clips looped across cable news. Headlines scrolled in heavy fonts. A captain, a removal, a federal chair. Words like bias and oversight and trust stacked on top of one another until they stopped meaning anything at all. Andrew Keller watched it alone from his kitchen table, coffee untouched, the television muted. He recognized the angle they used for his photo, old headshot, confident smile, the kind of image that now looked like a lie. His phone buzzed, once, twice then again. He didn't answer. The knock came at 9 sharp, firm, measured, not the impatient rap of a reporter. Andrew opened the door to find Thomas Reed standing on the porch, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tablet tucked under his arm. You've got an hour, Thomas said. Then this stops being theoretical. Andrew stepped aside. Come in. Thomas didn't sit. He walked the room, eyes scanning the framed certificates on the wall, the shadow box with flight wings, the photo of a younger Andrew in a pressed uniform beside a grinning crew. People think this is about you, Thomas said. It's not. Andrew leaned against the counter. It never is. Thomas turned. We're opening a formal inquiry. Not just into stratosphere, into charter culture. Contract carriers, training pipelines. Andrew nodded slowly. I expected that. Did you? Thomas asked. Because it's going to get ugly. Andrew closed his eyes for a moment. Good. Thomas studied him. You mean that? Yes, Andrew said. If it stays clean, nothing changes. Thomas exhaled. Evelyn wants you present for the first deposition. Andrew's chest tightened. As a witness. As context, Thomas corrected. There's a difference. Andrew nodded. When? Today. Noon. The room felt suddenly smaller. At 11:45, Andrew sat outside a conference room in a federal building he'd flown over 100 times, but never entered. The hallway smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. People passed without looking at him. Evelyn Brooks emerged from an adjacent office, jacket draped over her arm, hair pulled back tighter than before. You ready? She asked. No, Andrew said. But I'll show up. She studied him for a beat. That counts. Inside, the room was colder. 3 investigators, 1 court reporter. A single microphone at the center of the table. Andrew took his seat. They didn't start with the incident. They started with his childhood. Tell us where you grew up, one investigator said. Andrew blinked. I'm not sure how that's relevant. Evelyn didn't look at him. Answer the question. Ohio, he said. Outside Dayton. Working-class neighborhood. And your parents? Factory. School secretary. And when did you first fly? Andrew paused. 17. Air Force. Why aviation? He hesitated, then spoke honestly. It was structure. It was rules. It was a way out. The investigator nodded. And when did you start flying private charter? After retirement. It paid better. Less bureaucracy. And more exclusivity, another investigator added. Andrew didn't argue. They moved on. Describe your criteria for passenger removal. Andrew swallowed. Behavior. Non-compliance. Threat assessment. And appearance? Andrew looked up. It wasn't supposed to be a factor. But it was, Evelyn said quietly. Andrew closed his eyes. Yes. The word felt like a confession. Hours later, when he stepped back into the hallway, he felt hollowed out, not relieved, drained. Evelyn walked beside him in silence. You held up, she said, finally. I didn't defend myself, he replied. That's why. Outside, the sky had shifted, clouds rolling in from the coast, the air thick with something coming. They stopped at the doors. This won't end quickly, Evelyn said. You know that. Andrew nodded. I'm not looking for quick. She studied his face. Most people are. That afternoon, Laura Bennett stood in the galley of a different aircraft, prepping for a short hop north. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a link. She hesitated, then tapped. Andrew Keller's testimony. Redacted transcript. Leaked. Her breath caught as she read. Not the headlines, the words. I made decisions based on comfort, not evidence. I mistook control for competence. I did harm. She sank onto a jump seat, hands trembling slightly. This was real now. Back at his house, Andrew stood at the sink, staring at nothing as the water ran. His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. "Captain Keller," a woman's voice said. "This is Judge Marianne Holt." Andrew straightened instinctively. "Your Honor, I was on that flight," she said. "Row 3. His heart skipped. "I didn't know." "I know," she replied. "That's the point." A pause. "I wanted you to hear this from me," she continued. "What you did was wrong." Andrew closed his eyes. "Yes. And what you're doing now," she added, "is necessary." He swallowed. "Thank you," she exhaled softly. "Just don't waste the moment." The line clicked off. As evening fell, the protests started. Not loud, not violent, just signs outside corporate offices. Dignity is not optional. Fly fair. Andrew watched from his porch as a news van rolled past. He didn't feel attacked. He felt watched. And for the first time, that felt appropriate. Inside, his phone buzzed one last time. A message from Evelyn. "Tomorrow we begin phase 2. He typed back. "I'll be there." He set the phone down and stared at the darkening sky. For years he had measured altitude, speed, clearance. Now he was learning a different scale entirely, and there was no autopilot for it. The first pilot to speak broke the room open. "I removed a passenger once," he said, voice rough, hands clasped so tight his knuckles went pale. "Didn't write it up. Thought I was doing the company a favor." The room stilled. 40 chairs, coffee cooling, air thick with the weight of being seen. Andrew Keller stood at the front again, not behind a podium this time, just standing, sleeves rolled, palms open. Evelyn Brooks sat against the wall, notebook closed, listening. "Why didn't you write it up?" Andrew asked. The pilot swallowed. "Because I didn't want the questions." "Which questions?" Andrew pressed. The pilot stared at the floor. "Why I felt uncomfortable. Why I trusted my gut instead of the facts." A woman across the aisle nodded slowly, as if something inside her had clicked. Another pilot leaned back, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Let's say it out loud," Andrew said. "Our guts are trained. By movies. By stories. By who we see getting stopped and who we see getting waved through. That training doesn't come from manuals." A hand rose near the back. "So what? We're supposed to second-guess every instinct?" Andrew shook his head. "You're supposed to interrogate it." The word hung there. Interrogate. Laura Bennett sat near the side, notebook on her lap, pen still. She had been invited to this session not as staff, but as witness. She felt her heartbeat in her ears. "Here's the rule we're adopting," Andrew continued. "No removal without a written, specific cause tied to observable behavior. No vague language. No impressions." Someone scoffed. "That'll slow us down." "Good," Andrew said. "Speed has been our excuse." Evelyn shifted, finally speaking. "When speed becomes a shield," she said calmly, "abuse hides behind it." No one argued. They broke into smaller groups. Case studies. Real incidents. Anonymized but recognizable. A man in a hoodie who asked too many questions. A woman with a heavy accent who hesitated at the door. a teenager traveling alone with a one-way ticket. Laura's group went quiet as they read. "That was my flight," she said softly. Heads turned. "The one with the accent," Laura continued. She was visiting her sister. First time flying private. She kept apologizing for everything. "What happened?" someone asked. Laura inhaled. She cried in the bathroom after. Silence. Andrew watched from across the room, throat tight. This was the part he hadn't prepared for. The accumulation. The quiet harm. By noon, the room felt different. Not fixed. Awake. During the break, Evelyn stepped outside onto the narrow balcony overlooking the tarmac. The heat pressed in, humid and relentless. She loosened her collar and stared at the planes taxiing below, each one a sealed world of trust and fear. Andrew joined her, keeping a respectful distance. "You're changing the tone," she said without looking at him. He nodded. "I'm trying not to center myself." She glanced over. "That's new." He allowed a faint smile. It faded quickly. "I keep thinking about the ones who never complained." Evelyn leaned against the railing. "They rarely do." "Why?" Andrew asked. "Because complaining costs energy," she replied. "And dignity. People calculate whether it's worth losing both." He absorbed that. Back inside, the afternoon session turned harder. A senior captain stood. "I've flown this way for 30 years, he said. "No incidents, no complaints. Why should I change now?" Andrew met his gaze. "Because the absence of complaints doesn't mean the absence of harm." The man snorted. "Feels like we're being punished for being decisive." Andrew stepped closer. "Decisive about what?" The man hesitated. Evelyn spoke. "Decisive about who you believe." The captain opened his mouth, then closed it. That night, the news cycle pivoted. Less outrage, more analysis. Experts debated bias training. Former passengers came forward. Stories stacked, not explosive, just relentless. Laura watched one on her phone while heating leftovers. A man described being escorted off a plane for asking about a delay. A woman talked about being told she looked lost. She turned the phone face down, stomach heavy. Her phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. "Thank you for speaking today." She stared at it, then typed back. "It shouldn't have taken this." A pause. Then, "You're right." The next morning, Andrew stood in a hangar facing a new group. Different uniforms, different faces, same tension. He didn't start with rules this time. He started with a story. "I grew up watching my mother clean houses she could never afford to live in," he said. "I learned early who got listened to." He paused. The room leaned in. "I thought becoming a captain would erase that. Instead, I used it to draw lines." No one interrupted. "Change isn't about shame," Andrew said. "It's about accuracy. Seeing what's actually in front of you." He let that settle. Outside, a small group of protesters stood near the fence. Not shouting, just holding signs. Equal air, equal respect. Evelyn watched them from her car, engine idling. Her phone buzzed with an update from Thomas. Compliance metrics, early indicators. Mixed, but moving. She typed back. "Stay on it." At a diner across town, Andrew sat alone at the counter, untouched pie in front of him. The waitress poured coffee without asking. "You the pilot from the news?" she asked. He nodded. She studied him. "You look tired." He almost laughed. "I am." She slid the plate closer. "Eat." He did. As he stood to leave, she said, "For what it's worth, my brother got taken off a plane once, never flew again." Andrew felt the words land like a bruise. "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "Hope you mean it." He did. That evening, Evelyn stood before a closed-door briefing. Senators and aides packed tight. She spoke plainly. Data, trends, consequences. "This is not a pilot problem," she said. "It's a permission problem." She ended without applause. Later, alone in her office, she allowed herself a moment of fatigue. She thought of the jet bridge, the cuffs, the calm she had chosen. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. My daughter watched the hearing. She asked why people get treated differently on planes. I didn't have a good answer. Thank you for giving me one. Evelyn closed her eyes. Across the city, Andrew sat at his kitchen table again, coffee finally cooling beside him. He opened his notebook and wrote a single line at the top of the page. Trust is built in small moments. He underlined it. Tomorrow, there would be another room, another question, another chance to choose accuracy over comfort. There was no finish line, only the work. The subpoena arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Thick paper, heavy seal, no apology. Andrew Keller read it twice before setting it down on the kitchen table. Congressional hearing, oversight subcommittee, mandatory appearance. He felt the old instinct rise, the one that reached for procedures and escape routes. Then it settled into something else. Acceptance. Across town, Evelyn Brooks watched the same news break on a muted screen in her office. She didn't smile. Hearings were never victories. They were mirrors. By evening, Andrew's phone would not stop buzzing. Former colleagues, reporters, a number he didn't recognize but answered anyway. "Captain Keller," a man said, voice sharp, practiced. "This is Senator Mark Ellison's office. We'd like to discuss your testimony." Andrew closed his eyes. "I'm available at the hearing." A pause. "You're not interested in coordinating messaging?" Andrew opened his eyes. "No." The line went quiet, then disconnected. The morning of the hearing, Washington felt brittle. Cold air, grey stone, flags hanging heavy, barely moving. Andrew sat alone at the witness table, hands folded, microphone angled toward him. The room filled behind him with aides and cameras and quiet hunger. Across the dais, senators shuffled papers and sipped water as if this were just another appointment. Evelyn sat behind him, not as shield, not as ally. As observer. The gavel fell. "Captain Andrew Keller," the chair said. "You're here today regarding passenger removal practices in private aviation. Do you swear to tell the truth?" "I do." The first questions were soft. Background, experience, accolades, the familiar framing of respectability. Then the turn. "Captain," Senator Ellison said, leaning forward, "would you agree that pilots must act quickly to ensure safety?" "Yes," Andrew replied. "And that hesitation can cost lives?" "Yes." Ellison nodded. "Then why should we fault decisive action?" Andrew inhaled slowly. He had practiced this answer. Not the words. The honesty. "Because decisiveness without verification is not safety," he said. "It's convenience." Murmurs rippled. Ellison's lips tightened. Are you suggesting instinct has no place in aviation? I'm suggesting instinct needs evidence, Andrew replied, especially when it's deciding who gets removed. Another senator leaned in. Captain Keller, did you remove passengers based on appearance? Andrew did not look away. I removed passengers based on perceived risk. And what informed that perception? She pressed. Andrew paused. The room leaned closer. Bias, he said. The word landed like dropped glass. Behind him, Evelyn felt a flicker of something like relief. Not pride. Recognition. The senator raised her eyebrows. You're saying bias guided your decisions. I'm saying bias was unchallenged, Andrew replied. And because of that, it guided me. A staffer whispered urgently to Ellison. He waved it off. Captain, Ellison said, voice sharp now, do you believe this problem is widespread? Andrew glanced around the room. Cameras, faces, the weight of speaking for more than himself. Yes, he said, because the system rewarded it. A man at the far end scoffed. So this is about feelings now? Andrew turned toward the sound. It's about outcomes. Silence. After 2 hours, the questions shifted. From accusation to calculation. Training budgets, compliance timelines, public trust metrics. When it ended, Andrew's shirt was damp at the collar. His hands were steady. Outside, microphones surged. Captain Keller, are you saying pilots are racist? Do you regret your actions? Should private aviation be more heavily regulated? Andrew answered one question. Just one. I'm saying authority requires humility, he said, and we forgot that. He walked away. That night, Laura Bennett watched the hearing replay in her living room. Her teenage son slouched beside her, phone forgotten in his hand. That guy messed up, her son said. Yes, Laura replied. But he owned it, the boy added. Laura nodded slowly. That's rarer than it should be. Her phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. It was harder than I thought. She typed back. It should be. In another part of the city, Evelyn met with a small group of advocates. No cameras, no transcripts. Just people who had been removed, delayed, humiliated. One woman spoke quietly. I didn't want him fired. I wanted him to know. Evelyn nodded. Knowing changes things. Another man shook his head. Sometimes. Evelyn didn't argue. The next morning, the committee issued preliminary findings, recommendations, language like systemic risk, and corrective frameworks. The stock market shrugged. The news cycle moved on. But inside Stratosphere, something tightened. A captain refused a removal without documentation. A supervisor escalated a complaint instead of burying it. A flight attendant spoke up and wasn't dismissed. Small moments. Fragile. Andrew returned to the hangar that afternoon, not to teach, just to listen. He sat in the back as a young pilot struggled through a case study, words stumbling but sincere. Afterward, the pilot approached him. Sir, how do you live with it? Andrew didn't pretend to misunderstand. You don't, he said. You carry it, and you let it change how you act next time. The pilot nodded, eyes bright with something like fear. That evening, Evelyn stood alone on a quiet runway, watching a plane lift into the dark, lights blinking steady and sure. Her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. Votes look good, But pushback coming. She typed back. Expected. She slipped the phone into her pocket and watched until the plane disappeared into cloud. Across the city, Andrew sat at his kitchen table again, notebook open. He flipped past earlier pages, filled with rules and reflections and mistakes. On a new page, he wrote another line. Authority without listening becomes violence. He closed the notebook. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent and alive. Somewhere, another passenger boarded a plane, carrying assumptions they shouldn't have to defend against. The work was not done. It was only louder now. The email came from an address Andrew Keller did not recognize. The subject line empty, the body a single sentence. I was on flight 731. You put me off in Phoenix. Andrew stared at the screen for a long time before opening the attachment. It was a photo. Grainy. A man standing alone beside a jet bridge door, jacket folded over one arm, expression caught between anger and disbelief. Andrew remembered the moment with sick clarity. The man had asked why the delay kept changing. His voice had been calm. His suit had been wrinkled. Andrew had felt irritation spike and called it a security concern. Below the photo was a paragraph. I didn't file a complaint. I didn't think anyone would listen. I took a bus home. I missed my mother's surgery. She died 2 days later. I don't know if earlier arrival would have changed anything. I do know that being treated like a threat when I was just scared never left me. Andrew closed the laptop. He sat there, hands flat on the table, breath shallow, as if the air itself had thickened. This was the part no hearing prepared you for, not the public reckoning, the private inventory. His phone buzzed. Evelyn Brooks. You need to see this, he typed back. I know, came the reply. I've been getting them too. They met that evening in a small office that no longer felt temporary. Boxes unpacked, papers stacked with intention. A place where decisions lived. Evelyn slid her tablet across the desk. 16 messages in 3 days. Different carriers. Same pattern. Andrew scanned them. Missed weddings, lost jobs. Children crying as parents were escorted away. No violence. No threats, just suspicion. I thought exposure would slow it down, Andrew said. I didn't realize how much damage was already done. Evelyn leaned back. People think injustice is loud. It's usually quiet. He looked at her. What do we do with this? We don't file it away, she said. We build around it. The following week, the pilot who had spoken first in training resigned. No statement, no interview. Just an email to the team. I can't do this work while questioning every instinct. I'm tired. Andrew read it twice. He's not wrong, Laura Bennett said later, when Andrew showed her the message. They were sitting in a quiet corner of the crew lounge, coffee between them. This isn't easy. No, Andrew agreed. But neither was pretending. Laura studied him. You think others will follow? Yes, Andrew said. Some will leave. Some will dig in. And some? She asked. He met her gaze. Some will stay and change. That weekend, Evelyn flew commercial. Coach, window seat, middle-aged woman beside her with knitting needles and an apologetic smile. Hope you don't mind, the woman said, already halfway through an explanation about anxiety and hands needing something to do. Evelyn smiled. I don't mind. At boarding, A young gate agent hesitated as a man approached in paint-splattered jeans and a worn backpack. The agent glanced at the computer, then at the line behind him. Evelyn watched carefully. The agent smiled. "Good evening. You're in 12C. The man nodded, relief flickering across his face. Evelyn exhaled. It was nothing. And it was everything. Back at Stratosphere, Phase 3 rolled out quietly. No press release, no speeches, a new requirement buried in policy language. Any passenger removal now required a post-flight call from a supervisor to the passenger within 48 hours. Not an email, a call, a human voice. The first supervisor complained. "What am I supposed to say?" Andrew answered. "Listen." The first call ended in shouting. The second ended in tears. The third ended in silence that felt like something breaking open. By the end of the month, complaint patterns shifted. Fewer removals, more documentation, more pauses. Not perfect. Better. Andrew received another message. A voicemail this time. "My name is Teresa. You removed my son from a flight when he was 19. He stuttered when he got nervous. He stopped flying after that. I heard you on the news. I don't forgive you. But I needed you to know." Andrew listened twice, then once more. He did not respond. That night, he sat on his porch, notebook open, pen unmoving. The air was heavy with summer. Cicadas buzzing, relentless. He thought of the question he had been asked in training. How do you live with it? You don't. You let it live with you. Across the city, Evelyn stood at a podium in a closed room, briefing regulators from 3 agencies. No cameras, no slogans. "Change fails when it's performative," she said. "We're measuring behavior, not belief." A man in a grey suit frowned. "Public patience is limited." "So is public trust," Evelyn replied. Afterward, Thomas caught up with her in the hallway. "You're making enemies." She nodded. "That means we're not compromising." The next morning, Andrew returned to the same diner where the waitress had fed him pie weeks earlier. She recognized him instantly. "You still tired?" she said, pouring coffee. "Yes," he replied. She nodded. "Good. Means you're still awake." He smiled faintly. On the television above the counter, a short segment played. A private jet, a passenger boarding, a caption about new oversight rules. No outrage, no applause. Just information. Andrew paid and stood to leave. "Hey," the waitress said. "My brother asked about flying again." Andrew paused. "What did you tell him?" She shrugged. "That maybe it's changing." He nodded. "I hope so." Outside, the sun was already high. The city moved around him, unaware of the small recalibrations happening in offices and cabins and quiet phone calls. Later that day, Laura stood at the door of an aircraft, greeting passengers as they boarded. A man hesitated, clutching his boarding pass too tightly. She smiled. "Welcome aboard." He blinked, surprised, then smiled back. Andrew watched from the aisle, unseen. For the first time, he understood that redemption was not a moment. It was a series of choices made without witnesses. And somewhere between the jet bridge and the seat belt sign, those choices were starting to matter. The first lawsuit landed quietly, filed in a federal district court 3 states away, buried under a Friday afternoon docket drop. Andrew Keller read the summary on his phone. While standing in line at a grocery store, the hum of refrigeration units and casual conversation around him feeling obscene in its normalcy. Wrongful removal, emotional distress, pattern of discrimination. His name appeared twice, not in bold, not sensational. Just there. Permanent. He didn't flinch. He paid for his groceries, nodded to the cashier, and stepped outside into the heat. By Monday morning, there were 4 more. Evelyn Brooks reviewed them in silence, fingers steepled, eyes moving with practiced speed. Not surprise. Confirmation. This was the cost of pulling on a thread no one wanted touched. "Media will frame this as chaos," Thomas Reed said from across the table. "They'll say reform caused instability." Evelyn looked up. Reform revealed instability. Thomas exhaled. Same outcome. Different headline. "Then we control what we can," she said. Transparency. Process. Consistency. Andrew joined the meeting remotely, his image flat on the screen, kitchen wall behind him bare now. He had taken down the awards. Couldn't stand the way they watched him. "I'm named in 3 of these," he said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "You'll be deposed." "I know. Are you prepared for that?" Andrew didn't answer immediately. He thought of the man in Phoenix, Teresa's son, the dozens of stories that never made it to a courtroom. "No," he said finally. "But I'll tell the truth." "That's all anyone can ask," Evelyn said. Then after a beat, "And more than most offer." The deposition was scheduled for Thursday. Andrew arrived early. Suit simple. Tie knotted too tightly. The conference room smelled like toner and cold air. Opposing counsel wasted no time. "Captain Keller," the attorney said, pen poised, "do you believe you treated all passengers equally?" Andrew looked straight ahead. "No." The attorney paused. "You're admitting unequal treatment." "I'm acknowledging it," Andrew replied. "Admission implies intent. This was negligence reinforced by culture." The attorney smiled thinly. "Culture doesn't remove responsibility." "No," Andrew said. "It explains it." Hours later, he left with a headache and a strange sense of alignment. He had not defended himself. He had contextualized harm without diluting it. Outside, Laura Bennett waited by a coffee cart. "I didn't know if you'd want company," she said. "I do," Andrew replied. They walked in silence for a block. "You think this ends with you?" Laura asked. Andrew shook his head. "No. I think it passes through me." She nodded. "That's heavier." "Yes." That evening, Evelyn stood before a boardroom filled with executives who had perfected the art of listening without hearing. Polished table, soft lighting, water glasses untouched. A man at the far end leaned back. "This is getting expensive." Evelyn met his gaze. "So is distrust." Another executive folded her hands. "Shareholders are nervous. Passengers are human," Evelyn replied. "They outrank shareholders in my calculus." Silence followed. Uncomfortable. Necessary. "You're asking us to accept liability," the man said. "I'm asking you to accept reality," Evelyn said. "You can settle quietly or litigate publicly, but you don't get to pretend this isn't happening." One by one, eyes dropped. Outside, protesters gathered again, this time smaller, focused. names written on cardboard, stories distilled into black ink. Andrew watched from a distance, hood pulled low, unrecognized. He didn't join, didn't hide either, just stood. A woman stepped forward, holding a sign that read, "I was removed for asking a question." He recognized her from a report. St. Louis, weather delay. She saw him watching and walked closer. "You him?" she asked. "Yes," Andrew said. She studied his face. "You ruined my week." "I know," she nodded once. "You didn't ruin my life. I'm glad." She hesitated. "Don't stop." He shook his head. "I won't." She stepped back into the crowd. Late that night, Evelyn sat alone in her office, city lights scattered beyond the glass. She replayed a voicemail she hadn't answered yet. It was from her sister. "Mom saw you on the news. She said she's proud. She also said to tell you to sleep." Evelyn smiled faintly. She deleted the message and stood, stretching stiff shoulders. Tomorrow would be worse. Or better. Hard to tell. At home, Andrew opened his notebook again. He flipped to the first page. "Trust is built in small moments." He added another line beneath it. "Repair is louder than harm, but only if sustained." He closed the book. The following week, the judge from Row 3 published an op-ed, measured, precise, unforgiving. Accountability is not cruelty. It is the minimum requirement of authority. The piece went viral quietly, shared by people who didn't usually share. Laura read it between flights and forwarded it to Andrew with a single word. "This." He replied, "Yes." By the end of the month, settlements were being discussed, not hush money, restitution, counseling funds, travel vouchers that felt insufficient but acknowledged. Andrew insisted on one clause: personal apologies offered without legal language. Some attorneys objected. Evelyn overruled them. "Human harm requires human response," she said. The first call was awkward, the second angry. The third ended with a long pause and a quiet thank you. Andrew sat with each one, hands sweating, voice steady. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not explain. He listened. On a flight out of Denver, Laura watched a man hesitate at the aircraft door. His shoulders were tight. His eyes scanned faces, exits. She met his gaze. "Take your time." He exhaled and stepped forward. Andrew saw it from his seat in the back. No announcement, no applause. Just a small moment repaired. In Washington, Evelyn signed off on the final draft of a cross-agency memorandum. New standards, new language. No loopholes. Thomas glanced at the document. "This will change how things work." "That's the idea," Evelyn said. He hesitated. "You'll be remembered for this." She shrugged. "I'll settle for fewer people being humiliated." Outside, planes took off and landed, indifferent to the recalibration happening beneath them. Andrew stood at his window that night, watching navigation lights blink against the dark. For years, he had believed altitude was distance. Now he understood it was responsibility. And that responsibility, once accepted, did not let go. Not quietly. Not ever. The first flight Andrew Keller boarded as a passenger felt heavier than any cockpit he had ever commanded. No uniform, no stripes, just a boarding pass folded twice in his hand, and a seat assignment that placed him exactly where he used to look past without seeing. He stood in line, shoulders relaxed on purpose, resisting the old urge to scan for threats, to measure control. The terminal buzzed with the ordinary music of travel, wheels rolling, voices overlapping, a child crying somewhere behind him, life unfiltered. At the door, a young gate agent smiled and scanned his pass. "Have a good flight." Andrew nodded. "Thank you." 3 words. Nothing special. Everything different. He took his seat and buckled in, hands steady. When the safety video began, he watched it. Not out of habit, out of respect. Around him, people settled. Some tired, some anxious, some hopeful. Each one carrying a story he would never know. That used to bother him. Now it felt like the point. Across the aisle, a man with paint-stained jeans struggled to fit a bag under the seat. A flight attendant paused, crouched, and helped without a sigh. The man smiled, embarrassed. The attendant smiled back. Andrew felt something ease in his chest. This was how change looked. Small, uncelebrated, real. At 30,000 feet, Evelyn Brooks stood in a different kind of cabin, the quiet interior of her office lit by the glow of a desk lamp. The city outside had gone dark. Files lay stacked neatly, not finished but contained. She read a memo twice, signed it, and set it aside. The work would continue tomorrow. It always would. She allowed herself a moment of stillness. Her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. Final compliance numbers attached. Early indicators positive. She typed back. "Good, keep going." She leaned back, eyes closed for a breath, and thought of the jet bridge, the cuffs, the choice to stay calm. Power, she had learned, was not loud. It was precise. It was the willingness to endure discomfort, so others didn't have to. The plane Andrew was on landed smoothly. As passengers stood to retrieve bags, a woman hesitated, scanning the aisle. A man ahead of her stepped aside. "Go ahead." She smiled, surprised. "Thanks." Andrew watched the exchange. No authority required, just space given. Outside the terminal, rain fell softly. He walked with the crowd, anonymous, unremarkable, exactly as he should be. His phone buzzed. A message from Laura Bennett. Landed safely. "Good crew today," he replied. Always. Weeks passed. Lawsuits settled. Training expanded. Complaints were logged. Answered, learned from. Some pilots left. Others stayed and struggled and grew. The system didn't become perfect. It became accountable. That was enough to keep going. One afternoon, Andrew stood in a small classroom, not as an instructor, but as a participant. A new hire spoke nervously about her first flight, her fear of making the wrong call. Andrew listened, nodded, took notes. When she finished, he said, "Ask for help early. Slowing down is not failure." She looked relieved. Later, he walked past a wall where a new policy was posted. Clear language. No euphemisms. Dignity is not optional. He touched the paper lightly, then moved on. Evelyn addressed a graduating class at a public university. Invited quietly, no cameras. She spoke about systems and responsibility and the cost of looking away. A student asked how to keep going when change was slow. Measure progress in people, Evelyn said. Not headlines. Afterward, an older woman approached her. I stopped flying years ago, she said. I might try again. Evelyn nodded. You should be able to. That night, Andrew sat at his kitchen table, notebook open to the last page. He wrote one final line, then closed it. He didn't need to add more. The work had moved beyond pages. Outside, a plane crossed the sky. Lights steady, moving from one place to another, carrying strangers who trusted the air to hold them. Trust, Andrew knew now, was not granted by title or uniform. It was earned, moment by moment, by choices no one applauded. Evelyn looked out at the same sky from her window, the city breathing beneath it. Tomorrow would bring new resistance, new failures, new chances. She welcomed them. The alternative was silence. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that dignity travels with every passenger and every decision, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments with 3 words. Choose human first.